the Education and Pupil Services Committee will please come to order. I will now turn over the Education and Pupil Services Committee agenda to Co-Chair Mrs. Curry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The Education and Pupil Services Committee will come to order this evening. Mr. Marshall, can you please go over the agenda items?
Yes, thank you. So tonight we have 3 agenda items. The first is the social and emotional learning K-12 update for the middle school integration. This is for board action. Agenda item number 2 is the district equity plan, also for board action. And agenda item number 3 is the special education plan, where board action is also required. And I'll explain more about that part when we get through the agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marshall. You may start.
Okay, so the first, I'm sorry, one more agenda. We do have policies at the end that Mr. Desnoyers will go through, so I apologize. There is a 4th agenda item for 3 policies that are coming up. My apologies. So the first presentation is an update on the K-12 social and emotional learning plan for the Upper Darby School District. This will focus solely on the middle school integration of SEL competencies, or the CASEL competencies, into the middle school related arts courses. Not a replacement for lessons, but an integration of those skills and resources into what is already being taught in those classrooms and that content. So the graphic on the screen, this is the representation of the CASEL SEL competencies and what all 5 represent and how they can be integrated into, or how they will be integrated into the middle school related arts, the wheeled courses as we call them. We've proposed AR 1071 or 107 AR1 for change in planned instruction. And again, this will reflect the integration of the social and emotional learning skills into the related arts courses. And right now, currently, we have teachers who are scheduled to start working on it this week prior to the shutdown. But we're going to, when we catch our breath, we're going to circle back and get everyone back on board again for the hope that this is in place for next school year. And again, it's not a change, and we're taking away from anything, from any course currently that's being run, but an integration of these skills into what is currently being taught and delivered to augment and complement what's currently being taught in those skills in grades 6, 7, and 8. Are there any questions from the board? And all paperwork has been provided to the board for approval tonight, or in April.
Mr. Brown, I just want to comment that the email address that we're asking people to comment on is committee questions at upperdarbysd.org. For those in the public, they can send an email to committeequestions@upperdarbysd.org.
Plural, questions with an S. Okay, thank you.
And originally, Miss Elgart was going to be here to present. We want to limit the number of people here, so I took over for her. She is available as well, but this is her project at this point, but working together to pull this together.
Are there currently any questions from the board?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. If there's no questions from the board, then we will move on to agenda item number 2. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have Dr. Council is going to come up, and we'll take agenda item number 2.
Good evening, President Brown, Dr. McGarry, members of the board, members of the community, and everyone that's watching via the internet. This evening, we had the pleasure of providing you with an update on our equity initiatives, as well as our plan to continue our partnership with Corwin throughout the 2020-2021 school year. For anyone reading our plan for the first time, our overarching goal, the big goal, is to assure that every student, regardless of background, is exposed to relevant and engaging learning experiences and curriculum, and to increase access, opportunity, inclusion, and support for all learners. There are 4 action areas outlined in our equity plan. Each action area delineates goals and action steps that we are focusing on throughout the year. Constructing and enacting an equity vision, engaging in self-reflection, collaborating with our families, and hiring and placing personnel. Our strategic approach that we believe will sustain our efforts throughout the years to come is embedded in a framework that includes 15 members of our comprehensive deep equity leadership team. This is a team that's responsible or was responsible for crafting the equity plan and the continuous monitoring of that plan. 75 members of our Building Deep Equity Leadership Team. That's 4 to 7 employees from each building, teachers, administrators who are responsible for facilitating turnaround training in each school. Also part of the framework are 16 members of our District Deep Equity Leadership Team. This is a team that I meet with throughout the year. They share what's happening at each school and provide information in terms of supports that's needed. Also part of the framework is our Parent Deep Equity Workshops and 44 students that we have participating in our Youth Equity Stewardship Program. This is a big team approach that we believe will sustain our efforts and carry out our plan moving forward. Throughout the school year, our administrators, teachers, support staff, students, and parents have participated in trainings and workshops to help develop strategies and implement activities to ensure that culturally responsive practices will become the norm, will become institutionalized in the climate and culture throughout our district. Listed on the slides are dates when these trainings and workshops have occurred. I would like to point out that the week of the 9th was a busy week for us. On the 9th and the 10th, our Youth Equity Stewardship Program, our students were trained as a part of the Youth Equity Stewardship Program. On March the 12th, however, we had to cancel our parent workshop, and on March the 13th, and I don't mean cancel, we had to postpone our workshop, and on March the 13th, we had to postpone our training as well. We will reschedule those trainings once our schools open back up. We have done a lot. Needless to say, we have done a lot of work around constructing and enacting an equity vision, engaging in self-reflection and growth, and collaborating with our families and communities. Our equity efforts have extended beyond the training and workshops, and we are supporting our administrators and teachers to embed culturally responsive teaching principles in their planning, preparation, and delivery of instruction. For example, in addition to the equity training that each teacher participates in at the high school, all tenured staff members participate in Equity Action Research Group, known as ARGs, as part of their evaluation, part of the Act 82 Educator Effectiveness process. Domain 2 represents one component of the Danielson framework that make up our teacher evaluation system. Teachers are required to provide evidence of how they are embedding CRT principles into their practice. The high school building level equity team consulted with Corwin. Our liaisons from Corwin provided our district with CRT, culturally responsive teaching tools that are included in the components and guided principles. Here are culturally responsive teaching principles associated with Domain 2 and specific examples of evidence and artifacts teachers are able to upload when completing their self-assessments in the evaluation process. The evidence supports the work that our teachers are currently doing in the classroom, and what they continue to learn about throughout the equity professional development process. Again, this is only one example, and this is only one domain. The work that's being done at the high school ties the culturally responsive teaching principles to all 4 domains to help support all of our staff in the equity journey. There's a lot of work that's being done throughout the district above and beyond the required trainings to ensure that every student is exposed to relevant and engaging learning experience. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of our principals, our administrators, and the deep equity teams who are leading the way with creative thinking and courageous efforts. If those administrators were here right now, they would talk to you, they will tell you about the theater companies, the partnerships with different theater companies, staff trips to local Asian markets, district job fairs that we conducted this year, as well as a vendor fair to attract diverse and community talent. This year, we engaged our youth into our leadership series. Jen Peace, the Senior Learning Advisor from Corwin, she'll briefly share information about the Youth Equity Stewardship Program.
Good evening. So I just wanted to share, in light of the work that we've been doing this year with the Youth Equity Stewards in your high school building, I felt like since we've spent time in the past talking through the adult work, we felt like it was important to really share with you what the youth work looks like. So Benji Howard is one of our consultants. He has a ton of experience and actually co-created the Youth Equity Stewardship Program. He is also a managing deep equity consultant and has worked with and trained with some of the folks that have been inside your district also. Also, to note, he's an author and singer-songwriter, and that's important in just a second, and I'll tell you why. On the next slide, you'll see a picture of Stephanie Ann Johnson. She is also a consultant who has been working with folks from the Upper Darby High School. She also has experience as an award-winning singer and songwriter, was also on The Voice as a contestant, which I think is really cool. But she's a poetry specialist, has a Bachelor of Art in Creative Writing, and has trained with the Seattle Opera and the Portland Opera. So these are your two consultants that have been working closely with your youth equity stewards from the Upper Darby High School. So to dig a little bit deeper on what actually is the Youth Equity Stewardship Program, it is an experiential, arts-based process focused on engaging youth and adults as advocates for building soulful, inspired, and inclusive learning environments. So this is an opportunity for the youth for us to really gain a perspective from the youth and a wider diversity lens for recognizing and limiting educational disparities. It's also a mindset centered on growing empathy at the personal and organizational level, and it's a model that builds leadership capacity and multi-generational collaboration to support authentic school improvement efforts. On the next slide, I felt like it was important to really highlight the 5 phases of work that your youth equity stewards are actively going through in order to create a very positive energy and to really help the youth and the students lead to social change. And so if you see within the picture bubbles, it has the different phases of work that the youth equity stewards go through. They go on a journey which very similarly mirrors the work that your adults on the equity teams have also gone through as well. They spend some time learning about personal cultures and personal journeys, and they share and experience culture through personal stories, which is super cool. They gain perspective from the collective diversity of the community, and they discover how inequality impacts personal and institutional relationships. All of this is done in an open space dialogue where they have creative expression. They use music, and I've heard that there have been several dance parties that Principal Simone and Dr. Council have also joined in. So they use music, they use group discussions to really go through their personal culture and experience the personal journeys of their other fellow students. They also spend some time talking about social dominance and social justice and really learning how to recognize oppressive behaviors and their impact. They go through creative expression, creative resistance in phase 3, and inspire each other through their use of story and creative expressions as tools for social justice, really harnessing the power of the arts to develop deeper connections with others. Phase 4 takes the students to transition from learning to applying leadership in their own communities. So we're really empowering these young people to energize and to address the real challenges within their school environment, and then also challenging them to develop a plan of action that fosters intergenerational collaboration. The final phase, stewardship in motion, we empower the students to really become authentic leaders of social change in their schools. And I will say that through the help of Principal Simone, not only when we're there, there's a whole lot of action and a lot of interaction with students and with the folks who are on the equity team from Upper Darby High School, but they're also putting some other items into motion when we're not there. They're really focusing on equity work throughout the day. Principal Simone has developed a YES advisory group. There are student-led agendas as part of that. And so their voice is really being incorporated into the learning communities of the school building. So on the next slide, we'll talk about progress to date. With the current equity teams, we have helped your folks facilitate activities within their own school buildings. They've attended over 40 hours of professional learning over 2 years. We didn't get the last one in, but looking to reschedule that. Each school is in a different place, but they all love working together, and they love hearing from each other and sharing those stories and moving forward in that capacity. So this year's work was a focus on cross-team sharing, deepening classroom application work, strategies for preventing and reducing resistance, as well as a lot of time spent planning as a team. On the next slide, we really wanted to highlight where we would like to go next for the 2021 school year. We would like to really decrease our services and build capacity with your folks. So we feel like we can do that through 2 days of one consultant dropping to one trainer with the teacher leaders, and really digging into those culturally responsive teaching practices. And in light of the domains that were shared earlier, this will be a really good parallel to help build capacity within each building for turning that learning around and getting folks really thinking about and using the culturally responsive teaching practices that are so important for change. We also felt like 4 days with the Youth Equity Stewards would also be a really good way to continue to move forward and growing capacity with your young people at Upper Darby High School and taking a deeper dive. And then finally, the 2 parent workshop days we also felt like were super important as well, to be able to continue to facilitate learning with the parents in the community, also allowing them to know and understand what the Youth Equity Stewards are doing within their building, as well as the equity teams.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. Next school year, we're asking the board to continue the professional learning that our Building Deep Equity teams, our parents, and youth equity stewards are receiving with support of Corwin. With the approval, the allocation that we're asking will be $17,000 less than it was in this current year at a cost of $43,000. Again, I want to just take a moment to thank everyone, all of our teams, the board for your support as we continue to abate educational disparities and provide all students with opportunities, unity, and excellence moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Council, and thank you, Jen, for that great explanation of what the youth stewardship would look like. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
At this time, I know that there are some questions from the board, so are there, I know I have questions, but are there any questions from the board?
At this time, we have a question from Ms. Gina Curry and a question from Ms. Rachel Mitchell, in that order.
So I have 2 questions, and the one was answered about the dollar amount for next year, so thank you. The first question that I have, Dr. Council, is if you could share with the public what the difference is with the leadership group between the comprehensive and the district leadership teams. And then I have one more question after that.
The comprehensive team, Deep Equity Leadership Team, came together 2 years ago with the mission of putting together, of taking a look at all of our equity efforts throughout the district and coming up with a 5-year plan. 18 members, we started off with 18 members. Over the course of the 2 years, we've lost 3 members. But we still currently have 15 members who come together throughout the course of the year and continue to monitor the plan, continue to take a look to make sure that we are doing what it is that we said that we would do within our plan. I want to thank you, Ms. Curry and Ms. Dawes, for being a part of that team from its inception 2 years ago. But again, I consider that team the keeper of the dream. And Ms. Buford is here as well. Thank you so much. On that team, as a part of that team, we've had administrators, we had teachers, parents, again, who helped to craft the original equity plan and continues to monitor it throughout the years. The Building Deep Equity teams, again, 75 members. They are our teachers, our administrators, in the schools. It's 4 to 7 per school who's trained through Corwin. They're provided with the trainings, and they go back and they do the turnaround trainings in the schools. And I hesitate to use that word training. They really create a space to engage the teachers in the conversation around equity and inclusion. That's their role, the role that they play. We talked about the 16 members of our 16 members of our district equity team. That's one individual from every school. We will use members of that team to help support us throughout the new teacher orientation over the summer, as well as it's our hopes that we can provide training for those individuals to train our trainers so that we can continue to sustain our efforts throughout the years.
Okay, thank you. So on the second page, under hiring and placing personnel, I just wanted to know what the ongoing support would be for supporting the culture of the equity vision to ensure retention of personnel.
One of the things that we're excited about is our collective bargaining agreement. We were able to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement, which we believe is competitive to other CBAs throughout our county. We were able to increase the compensation, but there's other benefits that's included as well. One big part of the CBA, our collective bargaining agreement, is the tuition reimbursement, and part of that tuition reimbursement is supports our teachers and their professional growth, but it also, we hope, will ensure what we have included in that CBA will help to retain our teachers, to keep them here in our district longer.
Mrs. Curry, did that address your question?
Yes, thank you.
I think Mrs. Mitchell had a question or comment.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. John, thank you so much for leading this equity team over the past couple of years. I just wanted to thank you and Jen for what you have been doing with our staff. I know in my previous role as the board president, I was able to attend pretty much all the sessions in the beginning of the sessions to talk to the staff and the students, and I attended the parent sessions, and I really felt like we were moving in the right direction. I think my concern is going forward, while I appreciate, and I know this was always the plan, that Corwin would sort of leave us. What is the next steps? I just didn't know, John, if you're looking budgetarily wise to have like more of a lead in this, in the, maybe not next year, but for the following year, of someone who's going to be solely focused on this, because I'm concerned that we, started this sort of like momentum, but maybe, I want to keep it going.
Thank you so much. No, we're not going to do away with Corwin as a whole. They will continue to provide. Corwin will continue to provide support to us. We had an opportunity to talk with our teams, and these conversations come from the framework that we discussed, the different equity leadership teams that we had in terms of what support do we believe that we need going into next year and in the next 3 or 4 years. We do ultimately want to have want to be able to sustain our efforts, so we know that we need to, cut back a little bit or tailor back throughout the years, but we're not going to do away with our support with Corwin. In fact, we want to add different levels of support, not just through Corwin, but in support in other directions as well. So we still want to hold on to Corwin, but we do believe in conversations with our leadership team that there's areas where we can scale back. And the ultimate goal is to develop our own trainers who can work with Corwin at maybe even at a national level, be trained nationally, and come in and conduct the trainings here in our district. We're a large enough district where we should have in-house trainers, but right now we still look to Corwin for their level of support that they provide.
Okay, so for sustainability, I just want to make sure I understand this. So you're asking for $43,000 to continue the work next year, and that would be sort of like an ongoing situation?
Well, next year, it's a one-year agreement that we have with Corwin that we'll have next year. Again, we started our YES program, the Youth Equity Stewardship Program, so this 1 year, we'll have 1 year under our belt, and going into next year will be the second year. We definitely want to continue that. We definitely want to continue with our youth equity stewardship going into next year, as well as providing training for our building equity leadership team. We don't want to go away totally from supporting our teachers, and we want to continue with the youth equity stewardship going into next year. Again, at a cost that's $17,000 less than it was this current year.
Okay, thank you.
This is Ed Brown. I have a question. On the progress to dates equity teams slide, it has a bullet there that says different journeys at each school. So it looks like, it's apparent that, Dr. Council, that some incredible learning and progress has taken place in the equity area. So I'm just curious to know what that looks like. Each building has a different pulse, a different personality, and they have different needs. So obviously this lends itself to that. So I just want to get a feel for, if you can speak to it, if you can, just about the different journeys at each of the schools that it takes.
Yes, indeed. And Dr. McGarry can add as well. He had an opportunity to meet with two of our teams, our district deep equity team and our comprehensive deep equity team, and they shared their experiences. And it's important. That's the reason why we meet with each of our schools, so that we can hear back from the schools as to where they are in this journey. And Jen and I had a chance to go to some schools, so Jen can chime in as well. But what we know is that all our schools are different. They are all different, and the teams, the culture at each school is quite different. So when we look at the first phase, that tone and trust, some schools have moved past that first phase into the second phase, and they're moving along. Other schools have had to sit in tone and trust for a bit longer and continue to be there. We have schools that turn over staff quite frequently, more so they have to continue to build that tone and trust up. So the experience is different, or the journey is at different stages, and it's okay. We recognize that this is our second year of implementation. We are not going to be at phase 5. We don't expect for anyone to be at phase 5 at this point. We're just going through the journey.
I want to say that the work that's going in this is substantial, and it's when it makes it to the students, it's refreshing. But I think across the district, Primus Elementary School, Beverly Hills Middle School, Drexel Hill Middle School, Garriford Elementary School, across the district, you're seeing celebrations with their equity teams that are happening throughout the district. I think it's also powerful, as you know, we joined Black History Month at the County Council to see our students take on this initiative, whether it's the formation of clubs. I know here at the high school, there are two different groups that meet, high school student groups. One is a club, and the other is just a group that gets to meet with the superintendent, assistant superintendents, the director of secondary ed, and the high school principal. And through those conversations about equity and access, students are taking the initiatives and leading the charge. Here through the high school, they're going back and mentoring and working with middle school students and talking about mentorship. Our student representatives to the board have now talked about what would the sleep study be, how we'd have access to that, academics. Here this evening, tonight, talking about distance virtual learning. We've got students emailing the board, emailing us about equity and access and how we can make that happen and then move forward. So when it makes it to the students, which we're now in the beginning of that, I think it will really even take on even a more powerful tone. Many of the principals in this district deserve their hats off to them. Greg, Frank, John, Frank Salerno, Greg Manfrey, John Council, as well as all the principals in the district are all working hard. Getting it to the kids is a very powerful piece.
Thank you. Mrs. Curry, back to you.
Can you hear me clearly?
Not really, you're breaking up a little bit. Can you just repeat that, please?
Yes, I said, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you. Keep going. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Council, for agenda item 2. Mr. Marshallek, if you would go on to agenda item 3.
Okay, agenda item number 3 is also for board action. This is the Upper Darby School District Special Education Plan. This, we're going to go through a first look at the plan that was created this past year. It's part of our comprehensive planning process. This is due every 3 years as a requirement under Chapter 4 and under Chapter 14 of the Pennsylvania School Code. So up here is our first look. We did post this for public review on our district website and also through a parent link to our community members and parents on March 16th. As I mentioned earlier with the agenda items, going through the list of them, this will be, it's not for a vote in April, at April's board meeting, but it will be up for a vote for a special voting meeting at the April 28th committee meeting to allow for that 28-day review and some extra days as well to process this, to have it due to the state by May 1st. So as I mentioned, this is a requirement for every school district in the Commonwealth to produce and submit a plan that details the supports and services that are guaranteed under federal and state law for students with disabilities and the continuum of programs and instruction that's required to support our students with disabilities. So this plan is part of a requirement that we have to submit that the school board will have to approve prior to submission. It will detail over the next 3 years what our program would look like here in the district for our district students, but also our out-of-district students who need to place outside our public schools into a more restrictive setting. But some of the language up here is taken right from the Department of Education's website, explaining the process and why we need to do it. And again, as I mentioned before, this is a requirement under Chapter 4 as part of the comprehensive planning process, but also is referenced specifically with the requirements under Chapter 14, which is the PA code for special education services that is underneath the federal law, the IDEA, that requires services and access for students with disabilities. So there's a requirement under both of those chapters in Pennsylvania School Code. And there are certain requirements with this plan as well. One being they have to have a certain makeup of team members, which we'll go through in a minute, that make up the special ed team that comes up with this plan, including regular ed teachers, parents, administrators, and special ed support staff and support special ed personnel. This was different this year because normally we have a lot longer period of time to complete this, to go through this. Because of the delay from last school year or 2 years ago with the whole planning process as a whole, we were trained, if you want to call it, in December by the Department of Education and gave us a really short timeline to complete this plan. So we had to turn it around pretty quickly and have it due by May 1st, meaning we had to hold plans, create the plan, write it, put it for public review. So it was a very tight timeline that we had to meet for this requirement. So we pulled together a team in December to look at these areas of our district program, one being the district profile, which would be the demographics. If you notice in the plan, there is still a listed director of special education. We're trying to find out how we alter that. We cannot access that part of the plan to change that name. We have to request that from the PA planning team, so we'll make that correction in the plan. We just couldn't alter it during that time. Core foundations, which would be the assurances that we have as part of a school district for identification method, continuum of services, and what we believe to be appropriate for students with disabilities to be served in our public schools and our out-district placements. And again, that feeds into the assurances, which are the requirements under the federal and state law that we are to provide a certain level of support and service for all of our students, regardless of their background. And then it pumps out the district-level plan, which would be the actual program descriptions for individual programs and teachers in all of our buildings. So this was the most tedious part of the plan, was going through and identifying as best you can at the time you're doing it, caseload requirements and FTE calculations for each special ed teacher in the district, special ed teacher and support service personnel.
FTE, full-time equivalent?
Excuse me, full-time equivalent is what FTE stands for, meaning if you're a 1.0 special ed teacher, that you're considered, you can have a full-time caseload and you're teaching special ed. You're teaching special ed full-time all day, every day. You're a full-time special ed teacher. So we started back in mid-January with the planning process, and this is the members of the planning team. It's a representation of administrators, teachers, regular ed teachers, and parents. We had quite a few parents that came out and volunteered to be part of this plan. We were appreciative of that, and they were very, very helpful in providing feedback to this plan. So it started with getting the team together, looking at our current plan, looking what we currently had in place and what we have now that's not in our plan, and vice versa, what we had in our plan that we don't have now, for whatever reason. So we made those adjustments, the team reviewed it, reviewed all aspects of the plan, created a draft. The team reviewed it. Unfortunately, we could not meet on March 12th, which is our last date for the plan meeting, but they did have a chance to review this electronically, through our email system. And the bulk of the plan is based on our 2018-19, what they call December 1 child count. And I'll explain what that is. And that produces this document that our plan is largely created on. It talks about, as of December 1 in 2018, active students with an IEP in our school district through our PIMS, or Pennsylvania Information System, how we calculate those numbers. And it compares our LEA, which is Upper Darby School District, to the state. So you can see the comparison for percentage of disability categories, number of students, and what our district represents, and the makeup for LRE, which is another big aspect of the assurance part of the plan. How many students do we have educated in a regulated environment, 80% or more, other settings, and then less than 40% in the regulated environment. So again, this is what the school district has to use as part of the plan. We can use current data for certain parts or certain aspects of the program profile, but this is largely what the percentages are calculated from when we produce this plan. So some of the highlights and changes, to touch on a few of these. We did have some administration, some additions as special ed supervisors over the past couple of years. Some shifting around of responsibilities within the student service office. We did, have the ability to add board-certified behavior analysts, or BCBAs, to provide ABA strategies and principles, applied behavior analysis, what ABA stands for. We also wanted to include our Patent initiative, which is a new initiative this school year, a partnership with Patent to come in and provide, in real-time coaching to our students in low-incidence programs here in our district. The SEPRIN, as we call it, is a special education revision notice, plan revision. These are the caseloads and the teacher program profiles. So anytime that we shift or move let's say a teacher from Beverly Hills to Drexel Hill, we have to update this plan and make that adjustment in our special ed plan. Anytime a caseload may change from year to year, or an FTE is calculated differently, we would make that adjustment in this plan. So every summer we do adjust this to update current staff and current caseloads during the summer, and then we have it current for that school year. That is what the SEPRIN represents. And of course, professional development, what we're going to offer and how we're going to make it more of a better approach in terms of providing development to our teachers during the day, and our parents also for outside after-school activities. So we have that listed out as well to align with the district goals and also what we believe is important through feedback from parents and staff and overall programming. Again, this is the first look, the first public presentation. There will be another one in April 28th committee meeting. That will also be the voting meeting. Up until that point, there's a 28-day review. We've implemented an email address for the public to provide comments or questions for us to consider during this 28-day review. It is posted on the district website. It's posted here as well. We would love to get feedback from our community and our parents, any comments or questions that we would need to consider before we finalize the plan. So that's all I have. Any questions from the board?
While Ms. Buford is checking for virtual participation, I do have a question. I noticed you said it was a tight timeline to get it together, and there's still review periods that can take place where you can get comments and feedback. Once the final plan is submitted to the Department of Education, how does the process work? If they have suggested revisions or mandatory revisions to it, is there an opportunity, or are you required to make updates and changes to it based on their feedback that they provide?
So that's the hope is during the 28-day review process, they do give their feedback and comments. If there were a mandated change from the Department of Education, they would have to give us guidance on how they want to open our plan up. But the plan in theory, is developed and then approved from July 1 of 2020 for the next 3 years. Once we approve it here in April and the state accepts it May 1st, it will go into effect at that time. If there were any, like I said, any outstanding items that the state wanted to change for all Phase 2 districts, they'd have to guide us on how to open that back up and again put it back out probably for another 28-day review. With any change we do make to the plan, would have to do another 28-day review.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brown, there are no comments or questions from the board at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Buford. Ms. Curry?
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, can we go to the agenda items? Mr. Desnoyers?
Thank you, Mrs. Curry. For policies in this meeting, there are 3 policies that went through a first reading at the March board meeting. They are Policy 220, Student Expression, Distribution, and Posting of Materials, Policy 222, Tobacco Nicotine, and Policy 323, also titled Tobacco Nicotine. The difference is Policy 222 is for students and Policy 323 is for employees. The change, I'll now summarize the changes. For Policy 220, Student Expression, Distribution, and Posting of Materials, this is the companion policy to 913 that we discussed in the previous meeting. And my comment, therefore, is almost identical. PSBA separated out non-school entity activities from non-school entity materials and aligned many of the definitions and verbiage between Policy 220, this policy, and Policy 913, non-school organizations, groups, individuals, that was discussed in the Finance and Operations Committee meeting pertaining to the posting and distribution of materials. The updates to this policy strike a balance between freedom of expression, a right guaranteed under the Constitution, and the duty of the school district to provide a safe and orderly environment. To accomplish this, the policy now aligns with the precepts of current case law and terminology used in state regulations. Limits on freedom of expression in the policy, therefore, following current case law, are in the form of time, place, and manner restrictions and are not restrictions on free speech itself. Moving on, because the changes to Policy 222 and Policy 323 are very similar, I will provide one summary for both policies. Policy 222, Tobacco Nicotine, and Policy 323, also titled Tobacco Nicotine, contain a new comprehensive definition for the term tobacco product, which now incorporates vaping products, including the product marketed as Juul and other types of electronic cigarettes. Terminology was updated throughout the policies to reflect changes to PA law and the new comprehensive definition of tobacco product. The definition also includes the electronic devices and component or accessory parts of electronic devices that deliver nicotine or another substance to a person inhaling from the device, whether or not the device currently contains nicotine or another substance. The term excludes products that have been approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for sale as a tobacco cessation product or for other therapeutic purposes as designated in the law. Use of such tobacco cessation products by students may be addressed through board policy on medications. That concludes my summary of policy changes.
Thank you, Mr. Desnoyers. Are there any questions about the policies in this agenda from the board?
Ms. Curry, at this time, there are no questions or comments from the board.
Okay, thank you. That concludes all of the agenda items. Can you please, Mr. Fleck, review all of the agenda items?
We have to do public comments, Mrs. Curry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was afterwards. I apologize. Are there any public comments?
Ms. Curry, at this time, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Ms. Buford. At this time, Mr. Marshallek, can you please review all of the agenda items?
Sure. So this evening, we had agenda item number 1, which is the social and emotional SEL K-12 update, which was the middle school integration. This is for board action for the April board meeting. Number 2 was the district equity plan. This also is for board action with Dr. Council's presentation on the next steps and next year's contract. Agenda item number 3, this is also for board action, but not until the April 28th committee meeting, which will be advertised as a special voting meeting. But it was the update or the first look at the special education plan per Chapter 4 and 14 requirements. And agenda item number 4 were the update on the policies for the first reading by Mr. Desnoyers.
Board President Brown, if I could make a recommendation, because we don't want to mislead anyone, that tonight is just consensus to move forward. So instead of getting an aye or a yes from everybody, perhaps it'd be best if there is anybody who does not want to move these forward, if they could object and then tell us why. Otherwise, the non-objection would be consensus to move it forward.
Thank you. I think that makes it quite clear what our intent is, so we'll proceed in that fashion. So with that said, as Dr. McGarry said, if there is someone who is opposed to moving forward any of these agenda items, please state which agenda item you would not like to move forward and state your reasons why, please. If we don't hear anything or any objection, then that's your consent to move these items forward where we can vote on them at a legitimate board meeting. Thank you. Yes, and please state your name, which item you're objecting to, and state your reasons why. Thank you. Hearing no objections, I think we have consent from all board members to move these 4 agenda items forward. So we're going to move forward. A motion is in order for adjournment of the Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting.
So moved.
All in agreement?
Second?
All in agreement, please say yes.
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 Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for this evening.